Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to take just a handful of moments here to get everybody logged on and situated. Apologies for the slight delay, the few minute delay. As you can see, there are many of us who are a part of this session this evening. So we appreciate your patience and are super excited to talk to you a little bit more about the undergraduate research experience at William & Mary, which is something that is quite unique to our university and something that we're exceptionally proud of and very excited to share with you this evening. So again, we'll just take another minute or two here to get everybody logged on and comfortable, and then we'll go ahead and get things kicked off. Again, from introduction standpoint, my name is Kate Perry. I'm one of the associate deans here at William & Mary, and on behalf of the full admission team and really the university as a whole, wanted to shout out a big, wonderful welcome and congratulations to all of you on your fantastic achievement and acceptance into this university. So with that, also wanted to do a touch of housekeeping before we get started and run through the session format for this evening, since it's a little bit different than some of our other sessions. We have five different research projects that we are going to discuss, both the student and the faculty member who work with each of these different projects. So they'll give a run through of their project, and it'll be about 20 minutes for each group. So they will save some time at the end of their discussion to answer any specific questions to their particular project. And then we'll also wrap up around 5:30 from our formal presentation portion of the event and allow for just some general questions about research and academics and culture and life here at William & Mary. So we're hopeful that you'll stick with us through the end and hear from all of our fantastic presenters here tonight. Please be mindful too, if you do have to jump off, that's absolutely fine. We certainly understand. This session is being recorded, so it'll be posted to our website at the end of this week as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and have everyone except for my first two presenters close their main screen and kick it over to Michelle and Professor Saha to kick us off.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll start off. I'm Margaret Saha. I'm a faculty member in the biology department, and it is a huge pleasure to be able to introduce Michelle, who has been in my lab literally since the first day that she was on campus here. So quite an accomplishment here. So just a bit about my lab and what we do and how Michelle fits into it. And she fits into many ways in my lab as well. My research group is composed of about 15 undergraduates and one graduate student, so very focused on undergraduate research. And what we do in the big picture is to try to understand how a single cell, basically a fertilized egg, turns into an organism, such as a worm, a frog, a fly, or something like you out there. Obviously, that's a huge problem. So what we do is focus on a few more specific questions with biomedical implications. We focus on what happens when things go wrong. Now, why would we do this? Basically, because we're really interested in understanding how embryos fix themselves. And we focus on the nervous system and using frog embryos, obviously not human embryos for this. So we use an animal model system, but all the genes are identical for brain development in frogs and in humans in terms of the early stages. So what we're really trying to do, and Michelle is such a big part of this, is to try to understand the genes and the proteins that are used when things go wrong so that we could hopefully develop therapeutics that could be used in human trials someday in the future. So really important biomedical research that Michelle is interested in. And what we also do is use an approach called synthetic biology, engineering a lot of the constructs. So you may think, wait, William and Mary, STEM, engineering? Yes, think that, because that's what a lot of people in my lab are doing. And this is the same type of approach that brought you a lot of the COVID vaccines that you guys, should you attend William and Mary, and we hope you do, will all have in-person classes and allow that to happen. So I'll just mention very briefly that in addition to all the types of opportunities you're going to see here for undergraduate research, there are student-driven group research projects such as iGEM, which is a synthetic biology competition that students could also get involved in. And not to brag too much, William and Mary, even though we don't have an engineering school per se, has done better in this international competition than any other school in the United States over the last 7 years or so. So now, what is Michelle doing? You're going to hear how she fits into all of this, but she has been unbelievable in the lab, focusing on the role of calcium in wound healing and what happens when things go wrong in the embryo. And she is only a sophomore, but she is already a co-author on a submitted review paper that hopefully will be accepted soon. And it's a peer-reviewed paper. Michelle has just been phenomenal. She's already a leader in the lab. And I could go on and on about Michelle, but I'm going to let her talk about the incredible things she's been doing in the lab. So take it over, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saha. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Like Dr. Saha said, I'm involved in various projects in her lab, and I have a few slides that will show you some of the research that I'm involved in. So let's see. So I'll start by introducing myself and giving you a little bit of information about my background. So I'm a sophomore biology and philosophy double major, and I'm heavily involved in biological and biomedical research on campus. And like Dr. Saha said, I've been involved since my fall semester, and I've been working in Dr. Saha's developmental biology research lab since then. It was very easy for me to get involved in research at William and Mary, and even though I started my freshman fall semester, you can get involved in research anytime during college. And actually at the moment, I'm teaching some new lab members who joined this spring semester various lab protocols, and I'm helping them become more familiar with the projects that are going on in Dr. Saha's lab. So now you might be wondering what specific research projects I'm a part of. So this first project that I'm involved in, it's along with, I work with a graduate student and a few other undergraduates in Dr. Saha's lab. And the project is aimed at studying calcium activity in early embryonic development. So calcium, it's a very important signaling molecule in living organisms. And although we know more about its role in developed organisms, its roles in embryonic development, and specifically early embryonic development, is not as clear. So our project is trying to figure out what its role is in early embryonic development. So we use African clawed frogs as a model organism for this study. And on the screen, you can see calcium labeled in green fluorescence, and then you can see lines that look red, and that's the membranes of the cells, and that's shown in red fluorescence. So currently, we're in the process of analyzing data we've collected from hundreds of embryos that we've imaged that look like this. And we are planning on submitting a paper soon that will hopefully be published in the near future. So this is the first project that I'm involved in. And a second project that I'm involved in, which is very related to this first project, is studying calcium activity in response to physical perturbations during early embryonic development. So the first project is mainly trying to elucidate what calcium activity's role is in physiologically normal conditions. But now I want to see what how calcium activity responds to physical perturbations. And so for this project, I first had to design and 3D print and assemble a device that would enable me to put these physical perturbations on the embryos as they developed. And I wanted to make it, I wanted to make this device be able to put physical perturbations on the embryos at fixed rates and speeds and durations, so that everything is under a controlled experiment. And so here on the screen, you can see two different structural views of the device that I made. I used a CAD software to make these designs, and then I used one of the many 3D printers that we have on campus to actually build this device. And so some of the results from the experiment, the experiments that I've done using this device are shown on this screen. So we're using the device to put physical pressure onto the embryos in early stages of development. And so you can kind of see the circular shape. So the green, it's showing the calcium, like I showed before on the previous slide. And as the device puts physical pressure onto the embryo, we see this burst of green. So we see this increase in calcium activity immediately. And then I also look at it over time. So as I keep on putting physical pressure onto the embryos, what happens? And we see here that over time, as I continue putting physical pressure onto the embryos, it seems as if the calcium activity is decreasing. So these are very interesting results, and these are still preliminary results. I still have to conduct a lot more tests, but whatever we find out from this experiment, from this project, will help us understand better what calcium activity is, what calcium is doing, and how calcium activity is important in wound healing and in response to physical pressures that the embryos experience as they develop. Also, I did this project, I worked a lot on this project over the summer in 2020. So this was in the midst of the pandemic. And although it was definitely difficult transitioning from being able to work in the lab without any safety restrictions or any COVID related roadblocks, Dr. Saha and we worked hard to safely continue working in the lab and continue working on these projects so that we can make progress throughout the summer. So even though COVID was happening, I was still able to work significantly on this project. And also, like Dr. Saha said, I am a co-first author on a review paper. And the review paper is specifically on the Tweety gene family. So the Tweety family of genes, it encodes anion channels that are highly conserved throughout vertebrates. It's also found in non-vertebrates. And for this project, for this review paper, I along with a few other undergraduates in the lab, we did a comprehensive review of the structure of Tweety, the functions, their role in disease. And I primarily worked on this project over winter break. And this project, it involved us reading a lot of literature on Tweety and also doing a lot of data mining using databases to find as much information about Tweety as we could. And we submitted the paper to a journal this semester, and hopefully it will be published sometime in the near future. And then also, Dr. Saha is leading a synthetic biology research team. And so each year, the synthetic biology research team does a project and submits it to IGEM, which is an international synthetic biology competition. Lots and lots of primarily undergraduate teams create a synthetic biology project, and then they compete in IGEM. And like Dr. Saha said, William and Mary historically has done very well. In 2015, they won, I think, the grand prize, and since then they've won various other awards in the competition. And you might be wondering, well, what is synthetic biology, and how is it different from biology that you find people commonly working on in the lab? So the biology research that happens in a lot of labs is trying to figure out how naturally occurring systems and pathways work in organisms, but synthetic biology, it tries to create novel biological systems, ones that you can't find in nature. And its applications, it has many applications in the biomedical field, in solving environmental problems, and it's a very versatile area of research. And although I specifically am not involved in IGEM, the IGEM team at William and Mary, I am a part of a synthetic biology journal club where we read current literature on synthetic biology that is happening in labs across the world. And so as a freshman, my spring semester, I joined this journal club, and then this semester I'm TAing for this journal club. And it has been a great experience. It's a great way for me to see what's actually happening in the synthetic biology world. So that's all of the research that I'm involved in, but I wanted to close by saying overall that William and Mary is a fantastic place for you to get involved in undergraduate research. It's big enough where you have lots of research going on and you can find an interesting research project to get involved in, but it's also small enough where undergraduates like me are able to have good opportunities to be at the center of conducting research.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. And it seems like we did have one question jump in here about the calcium device itself and how you learned to build that. And was that something that you learned from a lab or a class experience or outside of the lab? So
so this was actually something that I did I learned independent of class. I was just really interested, and I wanted to find out how to do it. So I used lots of online resources, and it's actually sparked an interest in me in engineering. Before, I thought I was more involved in just doing like biological research in the wet lab, but this has been a great experience for me, and now I'm a lot more interested in trying to build things.
And I just want to jump in and say, we had this biological problem, like what are normal embryos doing and how are we going to figure that out? And then Michelle, as a freshman, came in and said, you know what? I could build this device. I think I could do this and I could help answer your problem. So here is a freshman William and Mary student. These students are fantastic, of course, who came up with a novel direction to answer a question in our research lab. And she's able also to collaborate in physics in the makerspace and with other individuals because we're small enough to really make that work. But this was phenomenal, you know, and this happens at William and Mary. But Michelle has just done so much for the lab. It's so exciting. So this 3D printed device is really going to open up a lot of new avenues. So thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Saha.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, thank you both very much for running us through all of that. We're going to keep on plugging along as we're tracking through for time. So our next research partnership with Terry and Professor Bailey. So I'll let them go ahead and jump on and introduce themselves and get started.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Chuck Bailey, and I'm going to introduce myself with a little hand wave here. And we'll let Terry introduce herself, and then we're going to both give you presentations, and we'll share our screen sort of in that order.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Terry Zach. Yep, I'm a geologist at the William & Mary, and yeah, here's our presentation.
All right. I am hoping that you're able to see what I have out there, up there. So Terry is going to talk to you about the mystery of the Shores melange. And I'm not going to get into that mystery. What I thought I would do is give you a little bit of a broader introduction here that will then sort of focus down on the kind of research that I do as a faculty member. And one of the things I want to say is that in the geology department here at William & Mary, we take a really broad view on what is called geology. So if you look at the sort of my screen, what is hopefully behind me, you can see the Earth's landscape. That's part of what we study. There are rivers, there are soils. Of course, there are rocks, which is what people think about when they think about geology. But we also are interested in the atmosphere above and the deep earth below. And here we do all of those things, and we'd like to think we do it in a really compelling way. We also spend a lot of time sort of pre-pandemic, but we're hoping to be back into this very soon, getting people out onto planet Earth so they are able to see and feel and smell and touch the Earth. So this is a photograph from one of the field trips that the Department of Geology took literally weeks before we all went to sort of the world we've been in for the past year. And hopefully you see a lot of happy faces out there who are kind of on this journey, this weekend journey of discovery to learn about the Earth literally in our backyard, further afield in the Appalachians in Williamsburg. So the other thing I want to take my time to talk about is geology is a found major. A few minutes ago, I looked and there were 41 participants on this Zoomer. And my suspicion would be not many of you are planning to come to William & Mary to do geology. It is something that is found when people go to college. And so one of the things I would throw at you after being here at William & Mary for 25 years is take classes in things you haven't thought about. You know, you may be very excited about becoming a computer programmer, but William & Mary offers lots of things that are very cool. And this will be one of the times in your life where you ought to be able to do that. And it sometimes leads to very new and interesting paths. I didn't set out to be a geologist. And I can tell you now, having done it for a long time, I'm really glad that I sort of took that fork in the road. The photograph you see, and hopefully you're getting a sense of the photos that I'm showing here. I'm trying to fill the screen with imagery to get a sense of what it is like to kind of be in a William & Mary classroom or a lab or the field. But this is an upper level geology class. And at William & Mary, we graduate about 30 majors a year, which is significant in the realm of earth sciences, especially because it's a found major. And we are always looking for more who are interested in sort of the earth and environmental sciences. So when you arrive in Williamsburg, these are the kinds of intro offerings that you would have during your first year here. Some have very cool names, the Age of Dinosaurs. Others, first year seminar, sounds a little bland, but let me just sort of highlight one of the things about the first year seminar. And this is the tie to research. And this is a project that one of my colleagues, Jim Casti, who you can see here with that sort of stuff on his face, he is a geochemist, environmental geochemist, and his fresh person seminar, first year seminar class, developed a project trying to understand cesium-137 in honey that is produced in the United States. And so this project ultimately led to publication. Paul Vellante was in that seminar, and he is one of the co-authors. So this recently came out in Nature Communications. So that's one of the things that happens, just as Professor Saha mentioned, you know, things that happen right on the first year can oftentimes lead to interesting publications and communications down the road. So I'm a structural geologist. And if I was going to sort of boil that down, I am interested in understanding kind of the architecture of the Earth's crust. How is it all put together and how has it changed through time? And I mean deep time, like geologic time. So the image in the screen here is a mountainous view behind the little village of Kontab, which is in Oman. And Oman is Well, the body of water you can see in the distance, that is effectively the Gulf of Oman, which is part of the Indian Ocean. And what's interesting about this and why it connects to my research is the rocks behind you there are part of a sequence known as an ophiolite. And what's interesting about an ophiolite is these rocks actually originated deep in the earth, actually in the Earth's mantle, below the upper layer we call the crust. So from the point of view of doing research about how the architecture of the earth has changed over time, one of the questions we want to understand are how are things like ophiolites, rocks from the deep earth, emplaced effectively at the Earth's surface. So those are some of the things, some of the questions that I try to answer as a geologist. I work with a large research group in the geology department. Here you can see the Earth structure, well, the Structural Geology and Tectonics Research Group. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see our icon. I made it a little bigger than the William & Mary icon. I think mine is a little bolder. And my research group is generally composed of lots of students who are excited about learning about the Earth. So this is, of course, the pre-pandemic research group. And this is what it's been like for much of this year. Many Zoom meetings, but we've also managed to do work in the field safely, as well as in the lab. There have been a bunch of challenges, and I'm optimistic as we roll forward into a new year that some of those challenges will fall away and a lot more of the good will be there. So that is a sense of sort of what I do. And we go to the field. So here you can see us in the field, mired in the mud. Sometimes we go to faraway places like Oman or Norway. Here are 3 of my research students on a field course, well, actually a field research excursion in the distant wilds of Oman, very scenic. And then we also spend time in the lab. We are trying to understand sort of the secrets that are contained in mineral grains that tell us the story of the Earth. So here Hope Duke is working in the lab, trying to understand the age of individual mineral grains that tells us something about how they work. And then we also spend a fair bit of time doing what I would say digital cartography, trying to build 3-dimensional models and maps of how the world looks and how it has changed through time. So that's a very quick and brief introduction to sort of what I do as a professor. But my most important job is to introduce Terry. And Terry Zak is a senior at William & Mary. She is working on her honors thesis. And here's a picture of Terry doing field work. Her field site involved getting there by canoe. And we were able to do that throughout the summer of 2020. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to Terry. And she's going to give you the story of the Shores Melange.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chuck. Let me get myself set up. Okay, everyone. So I'm Terry. Thank you so much again, Chuck, for that introduction. So we're going to get into the mystery of the Shores Melange. This is actually the title of my thesis, which is Structural Analysis of the Shores Melange at 7 Islands, Central Virginia Piedmont. First, let's get that title out of the way and really look at this picture. This is where I go for my research. It is a beautiful, beautiful area full of all kinds of greenery. And what I'm really focused on is these outcrops of rock that you can see kind of popping up and creating these rapids, and some of them are off to the side. And this is just a really, really great picture. And I think that really encompasses the glory of doing research with William & Mary. Now, with geology, we are on a very active planet, and this planet's broken up into plates, and these plates are constantly moving all of the time. And we can see more evidence of this kind of stuff when we look at earthquakes. This is the earthquakes I screenshot from the USGS website that I took yesterday, and it's the 2.5 magnitude earthquakes over the past 24 hours. And you can see that it's a lot still for just 24 hours. And then, of course, this is a really hot topic in science and media right now, is that there's a lot of volcanic eruptions happening currently. Now, all of this kind of proves, and not proves, but evidence of our planet is geologically active. It is constantly moving, and it didn't always look like it does today. Some might know of the word of Pangea, which is a supercontinent that had all the continents kind of pushed together, and that's in the very, very far in the past. And this is a picture of today. Now, What we didn't really see is earthquakes and volcanoes on Virginia. Well, Virginia was a very active area. It was on a very active margin, and this active margin experienced quite a few things before we came to this kind of stagnant, not very earthquakey or volcano-y kind of state that we're in now. And this is right here. We believe that there was a suture zone between Laurentia as the ancient continent and something else, either a continent or a volcanic arc that collided into it. And this is where we think it happened. And that is my study area, is this little dot right here. Now, let's go ahead into a cross-sectional view to kind of visualize what happened during this time. Now, Laurentia is the word we use for a North American, ancient North American landmass. And that is to the left of this picture. And then to the right, we have the Chapawamsik volcanic arc, which is just kind of like an island arc. And you can see that this is approaching the Laurentian margin, and where you can imagine that this is kind of where Virginia was in the past. And this is kind of a signal that an ancient open ocean that predates the Atlantic Ocean today started to close. And you see this fancy word that I mentioned earlier, which was melange. And what a melange is, it comes from the French word mêler, which means to mix. And that is actually a very simplified and easy definition to remember. And what a melange is, geologically speaking, is that it is basically the sediments that have been scraped off the bottom of the ocean. And eventually this volcanic arc ends up colliding into the Laurentian margin, and it thrusts all of this rock on top of it. And we get remnants of this, and we can see these blocks, and there's this mixture of sediments and other kinds of things all crushed together. And so that's kind of what I'm studying. So let's get into the purpose of why I'm doing this. So the first part is we're determining if the shores melange is actually an ancient plain boundary, or as I've said before, the word suture. Additionally, we are going to create a detailed map of the area using pretty new technology like drone imagery. And all that together is kind of my research. Now, let's start off with kind of like back before we get into all the funny, cool results and really great pictures. This is kind of overhead imagery of the study area. So this is eagle eye view looking directly down. And you can see that we got the James River flowing through here. We have the old railroad town of Shores towards the north. And I can clear this up a little bit for you guys, makes it a little bit easier to see. And this is kind of what I'm looking at. And before, there was a bunch of rocks that we look at, and that's kind of our target for it. Now, after doing these and taking a bunch of measurements, looking at all the rocks and their structures, everything great about it, this is kind of the end result. Now, this kind of map has not been produced before, not at this level of detail at least. And I'll go ahead and talk about how we got here, how we got to this glorious, very colorful map. So my research area is literally in a river. We had to get to it by canoe, and a lot of the outcrops barely had any land to reach it. We had like a patch of river grass here. And it's some of the outcrops are very small. We got the information we needed from it, definitely. Even small outcrops like this hold a ton of information that we can use. And then some of the outcrops were very, very big, where we could all both fit on it pretty easily and not worry about it. And this beautiful image is very, very colorful. It allows us to get pretty up close, as you can see me in the bottom left-hand corner, taking pictures of the rock up close, getting kind of a feel for how some of the structures look. And there's just so much information here for us. And it's one of the greatest things about geology is getting to be here and really looking at and physically like touching these rocks and being influenced by it. Now, other things, I mentioned the word drone. So we use drone imagery to look at these outcrops from a view that we can't quite get from being on land. So this is a stitched together image, and and you can see this scale bar right about at the bottom of the image. It's 2 meters. And what this is, like I said, is a stitched together image. And what we did is on the ground, we took a few measurements, we identified the rocks that are here, and we were able to produce an even more detailed map than the one I showed before. Now this is kind of what's produced by using this new and modern technology, using drones. Now, it's not always all fun under the sun. We do have lab work, and this part's it's pretty fun too. So this is an image of me using our Petrographic Microscope, which is a fancy word for being able to see rocks on a very microscopic level to get that information on that kind of detail as well. Now, usually we have these rocks, and these rocks are cut, and sometimes we polish them, and we take what's called a thin section away from these rocks. And it's not too big. It has to be small enough to fit underneath the microscope so that we can zoom in on it. And this is an example of one of the thin sections and what it looks like. This one's kind of messy. Some of them look pretty, a lot prettier. Mine didn't look always all that great, but this is still my favorite because there's so much going on here, and there's so much information on such a very small, as you can see at the bottom, like a 1 centimeter scale. And this tells geologists a lot about what happened to the rocks on an even grander scale. That's one of the great things here. Now, we came to some conclusions. The conclusion was the Shores Melange is actually an ancient suture. So it is where the ancient Laurentian margin, where Virginia was once directly pretty active, and the volcanic arc did end up colliding on it, and we were standing on the area where it happened. That is what's so amazing. Now, not only that, but we also gathered enough evidence that this has a polyphase history, and it indicates a significant deformation that occurred after the suturing. So we knew that this is a suture zone, sure, but we didn't really realize that something else happened after it. And sometimes when rocks have been deformed and you have this kind of ancient deformation, they are more significant, or they're easier to deform again. So that leads to another mystery that hopefully we can get into a little bit later. I was grateful and very grateful to receive funding from the Chuck Bailey. He had some research grants fund to study this area, and that was provided by the U.S. Geological Survey grants. Our geology department at William Mary also helps students tremendously with any funding, transportation, all kinds of help that you need for this kind of research. And of course, we have William & Mary's own Charles Center research grants that are provided to a number of undergraduate research students, so that you don't have to worry about the finances of this, and you can get to enjoy what you want to do. And I think that's a fantastic thing, and I'm really glad William & Mary provides this, and I'm really glad we have people that can get us this kind of funding through either your department or through government means as well. Now, I have a little bit of a history. I wasn't directly transferred to William & Mary. I am a transfer student from Thomas Nelson Community College. I transferred in my junior year, but I knew I wanted to come here very, very early on. My freshman year of community college, I got involved with William & Mary pretty indirectly. They lead, the geology department leads field trips. And that is where I met a great group of people. This actually image is a little bit in the future. I participated in this my first year here at William & Mary, but we always have these research groups, or not research, these field trips, and and anybody's involved in it. So it's a good opportunity. I'm really, really, really happy that this opportunity was presented to me even before I got into William & Mary. And then another shout out to my professor, Chuck. In our structure and research group, we are a very tight-knit community, and we helped out. And I'm really glad I got to meet you before I got to William & Mary, and I'm super, super happy to be involved with William & Mary and this community in the geology department too. All right, thank you so much.
Awesome. So Terry, we did have one question come in that was asking about how you gained these geological skills before coming to William & Mary, which I know you touched on here just a little bit, and maybe a little bit of expansion on that field trip in particular, and how you got the position in the lab itself, like once you actually got here to William & Mary.
So I want to emphasize, don't be worried if you don't have the skills. A lot of things we learned in field. So if you don't have to have a lot of background. You don't feel stranded. I never felt like I was running to catch up. Everybody was there to help me. Chuck helped a lot. We have a lot of in-field right there kind of training, and it's nothing too hard. I had geology classes at Thomas Nelson that helped out a lot with like identifications and stuff like that. So I had that before I got to William & Mary, but it was pretty hands-on, pretty there in the field. It was great. What was the second part of that? I apologize.
No, no problem. Was once you actually got to William & Mary, what was the transition into the actual lab? How did you reach out directly to your faculty members, or how did you get into the lab itself?
So that's a really great thing too that our department does, is that we have kind of like a 404, which is like I believe your junior year, you kind of start getting involved and you talk directly, and they walk you through the steps of asking your professor or asking your research hand to like what projects they have and what you may be interested in. And you can also there's plenty of geology students that have their own ideas, but you get that wide interest and information about all the other professors too, and you kind of pair yourself, but you're never by yourself kind of thing. But yeah, you can come in with your own ideas, or other professors have their ideas that they might want, or they might think pairs well with you and your skills as well.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so we are moving right along. So I will pass it along to our next research team, Cecilia and Aubrey, and I will let you all kick it off with quick introductions.
Okay, hi, I'm Leslie Cochran. I'm faculty in linguistics. I'm also a William & Mary alum, and so it's really exciting to be here at an admitted students event. I remember my own very fondly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do in linguistics, and then turn it over to the two projects that we've got to talk about today. So in linguistics, we do collaborative research with students and faculty, and there are a number of different ways we do this at William & Mary. So sometimes, as you've seen from other presentations, you're working with faculty in their labs. Sometimes it's more student-driven, where a student has a particular honors project or summer project that they're doing. In linguistics, we also have a program-wide meeting where lots of people who are working in different teams, different labs, on different things get together and present their research to each other and talk about it, and get help and workshop their ideas. So it's a really collaborative process, and I think that is the most exciting thing about it, is that students and faculty are all working together to do this research. So linguistics, like geology, linguistics is a found major. It's something that you might not have done or even heard of before you come to William & Mary. But basically, linguistics is the scientific study of human language, and that can cover a lot of different things. Language, it's everywhere. My particular corner of research that I work with students on is called discourse analysis. It's a qualitative method where we look at how language connects to identities and to linguistic contexts and to social contexts. So we try to put together language with society and see what we find out. The project that Aubrey is going to be talking about today is looking at identity of disabled people in the context of memes on Instagram. So memes are a really prevalent form of language that is out there in the world right now. They're things that people are communicating with, and so we want to study them the same way we would study anything. And our research question for this project is thinking about how do disabled creators on Instagram use memes to resist and to combat negative cultural stereotypes about having a disability. So to do this project, I'm working with a team of students, including Aubrey, who's here today. And having students to collaborate is it's really invaluable to have that input. So I'm providing mentoring and research opportunities and maybe some structure. But I gotta be honest with you, my very first Instagram account was a research account. Like, I just started researching it before I even really was a part of it. So students are much more immersed in the world of memes than I am at this point in my life. So we've got a collaboration where we're all learning together, learning linguistics and learning about our research questions at the same time. And so being able to work as a team, I think is just something that's really unique. And it's something that so far in my academic career, I've only found as first a student and then a faculty member at William & Mary, because it is that, that team relationship where everyone is providing their input. So Aubrey, why don't you tell us about the research?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna share my screen. Please bear with me as I get this PowerPoint up for us. All right, so yeah, I'm Aubrey Lay. I'm studying linguistics and international relations here at William & Mary, and I'm a current sophomore working with Professor Cochran at Discourse Analysis at William & Mary, which is the name of our group. So like Professor Cochran mentioned, we're trying to answer the question, how do disabled creators use memes to combat harmful societal narratives about disability? And again, we're not necessarily trying to analyze the effect of, say, variable Y on variable X or what have you. We're really just trying to look at this discourse in context and understand as much as we can about the identities and narratives that are at play and how those narratives are being used. And I know that we have another linguistics project from Celia as well coming right after me, so I'll try to make sure I go through this quickly as possible, but happy to answer any more questions afterward. So how did we go about doing this? Essentially, we were looking at memes on Instagram. We had to narrow that down because looking at all of the publicly available posts about disability on Instagram, we have to determine what we're qualifying as a meme, and then what memes we want to allow into our data set. So we did sort of an initial ethnographic dive into this discourse and determined that we wanted to look at memes that occurred from around 2019 to the present day. And for each meme, we wanted to make sure we put down the username of the person who posted it, the date that it was posted, any hashtags related to disability. We identified a couple such as Spoonie memes, Not Your Inspiration, disability memes, etc. That was sort of what we were looking up when we were trying to find the memes. We wanted to ensure that these memes were multimodal. So are they meaningfully combining images and text to create a new meaning? If you had, say, a post on Instagram that said, it was like a flower, and then it said, "Don't be ableist." Well, yes, there's an image, there's text, but it's not necessarily interacting to create new meaning. Similarly, we want to make sure that they're intertextual. Is it drawing meaning from other instances that are found within the speech community that we are addressing and looking at? So, for example, you might have a meme like Baby Yoda, something that is present within the discourse that we can point to and we can say, people are using this, people are drawing meaning from the fact that it exists. It is very much present within this community. And also confirming that they are using these counter narratives by intention. So are they actively countering harmful stereotypes and narratives about disability? There were a lot of memes where disabled people were expressing experiences that they had with, say, using mobility aids like wheelchairs, or experiencing chronic fatigue or pain. And unless they were directly countering harmful narratives about disabled people, we didn't want to include them, not because we don't value those memes and the narratives that they're expressing, but just because otherwise we would have so much data and our project would not have quite as much point to it. A great part about this project, I think, was that because it was all virtual, we were entirely able to continue doing it throughout the pandemic. Writing the IRB form was pretty easy because we would get questions like, how is your team going to ensure that you have COVID safety during this procedure? And we would say, well, we are using our phones to access the data. So I think that we were sort of lucky in that regard. And I think the very exciting part about this project was we were able to identify counter narratives. So what messages about disability are these memes specifically countering? We were also able to identify some specific meme paradigms about how memes are expressing their messages through multimodality. And this last one was, I think, especially really exciting just because, like Professor Cochran was mentioning, memes are a form of discourse that is out in the world. They are worthy of study. And yet, it's difficult to find within linguistics some sort of concise way of categorizing and describing the ways memes are functioning and the ways that they are expressing their messages. So it was very exciting to be able to sort of lay out on our own groundwork and understanding based on what we were seeing. So I could go through all of the narratives and paradigms that we found, but I know we have some very limited time today, so I'll just go through a couple examples and run through how we coded them within our data set. Also, back here, I totally forgot to mention, this is my pet rat, the very important fifth member of our research team, Agatha, right here. So one meme here we have is intertextual. So this is a meme format that we saw very often with this hand reaching up, someone reaching down, give a high five, and then they fall down into the water. Very multimodal. If you look at just this image, you would have no way of connecting it to disability discourse. And if you just saw the words, chronic illness patient, doctor, your lab results are normal, they don't mean very much on their own. But combined, we get this message that strongly counters the idea of medical authority, the idea that doctors and medicine have sort of a monopoly over describing the experiences of disabled people, because according to the doctor's perspective, your lab results are normal. You don't have a problem. According to the chronic illness patient, they are literally drowning in their disability at this moment. So this was a very strong counter narrative to that medical authority idea. And a paradigmatic type, one paradigmatic type that we identified was this sort of labeling type, where you have objects or people being labeled by text within the image. And this was also a comic. As you can see, it has this sort of narrative structure with 4 panels to be read in a particular order, portraying a particular little story. So I really like this example. Here, this one, similarly intertextual. This references, I believe, the Eric Andre show. I didn't even necessarily know that, but again, intertextuality doesn't necessarily mean that you know where it came from. It means that people are using it and building shared meanings off of how it's used within the community. So it's also multimodal, because it says when you tell an able-bodied person that if they live long enough, they'll become sick or disabled in some way. Why are you booing me? I'm right. It very strongly counters this idea that disability is marked, that it is unusual, that it is strange, when in fact, anybody could have a disability, be disabled at some point in their life. And it is a caption type meme, according to our paradigms that we found. So we have, again, this image down here, and here at the top, we have a caption that sort of simply labels, this is what's going on in the image. Next steps, we will hope to write up our findings in this project and present and publish in the fall at some point. And our lab is also working on a different project on Zoom discourse that I'd be really happy to talk about later if we have the time, which we're very excited about. You can check out our website, discourseanalysis.wm.edu, for more if you want to learn more. And I think I'm really excited about this project just because as a non-disabled person myself, it's been great to learn more about these issues and how to interact with these discourses in a more conscientious way, and be able to highlight and lift up voices of people who are countering those harmful narratives. So yeah, if anybody has any further questions, feel happy to answer them. But I will stop sharing my screen now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Aubrey. Really super fascinating and really interesting. And I did just drop in to the chat feature, the website, if you all wanted to check that out for more information. So with that, we will move on to our next group.
Hi, I'm Anya Hogaboom. I'm also faculty in linguistics, and this is Celia Metzger, who's been doing research with me. Professor Cochran did a great job talking a little bit about the different ways students get involved with research in linguistics. We have linguists working on many different kinds of projects. And you'll hear 2 very different projects today. And this one is part of research that I'm been doing over some years with a larger group outside of William and Mary. It's headed by a doctor of psychiatry who works with patients with schizophrenia. And there's a growing interest in trying to make linguistic connections to the diagnosis of patients with schizophrenia. The disease has a wide range of ways that it presents, and some linguistic factors are clearly fruitful places to look for abnormalities. And so we had a battery of tests that were carried out by the doctor of psychiatry, head of the team, and his direct research assistants with patients with schizophrenia and healthy controls. And then my work in that area has largely been, or entirely until now, been looking at the acoustics of the recorded speech and seeing if we can see differences about the intonation or exactly how the vowels are realized between the two different groups. But Celia's come in to look at a totally different aspect of the data, which she'll be telling you about today. And it's a really exciting advance of how linguistics can dig into and inform actually a health field in a way that historically there's been less interaction between. So she's gone through the data, I think at least 3 times, and coded it many different ways and found some really interesting and brand new kinds of connections. So I will let you tell about that.
Awesome, thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen and show you some of the research that we've been doing. So hi, I'm Celia Metzger, and I am a senior double majoring in linguistics and Russian post-Soviet studies. And I started this research as an independent project with Professor Hogeboom in my junior year, but it's developed into my honors thesis, which I'm very excited about. So yeah, we're looking at how language and schizophrenia are related, as Professor Hogeboom was talking about. So kind of to give you a little bit of background about how language and schizophrenia are related and why we're looking at it. So a lot of times, clinicians will describe people with schizophrenia as having something that's called disorganized speech. But unfortunately, disorganized speech isn't defined in linguistic terms as well as we would like. A lot of times people will say, like the DSM-5 describes it as switching randomly from topic to topic and generally being incoherent. But the problem is that's not really based on linguistic principles of coherence and cohesion, or what it even means to switch from one topic to another. So we are hoping to take a linguistic lens on this and see if there's a difference in how patients' controls speak in terms of linguistic cohesion and coherence. And so in order to do that, we're looking at how people describe a picture, as you can see here. And we wanted to take a picture description task because prior research has given patients and controls different tasks and then compared their speech in that way. But we wanted to make the differences between patients and control speech as minimal as possible. So we both had them do the same exact task and narrowed it down by having them describe the same picture so they're talking about the same topic. So we had them describe this picture, and we are comparing patients' controls on different parameters. So looking at narrative structure, so how they switch from topic to topic, and we're also looking at completeness, or how detailed their picture descriptions are. So first, we're looking at narrative structure. And so in order to see how people switch between topics, we're looking at something that's called discourse markers. Discourse markers are words or phrases that help to organize discourse into segments. So there are things like, we have basic discourse markers, so things like and, but, also, that kind of help you tie together different topics in a sentence and continue speaking. But then we also have things like complex markers. We have different kinds here. So we have positionals. So this helps you to describe how things are related in space. So for instance, there is a girl, on her right, there is a boy. So that connects those two topics of girl and boy via space. We also have things like causation. So for instance, it must be a sunny day out because the boy is wearing sandals. And then finally, we have syntax. So this is when you embed the next topic into the previous sentence to explain how the two things are connected. So for instance, the woman is waving to the kids and they are in a boat. That's connecting the woman and the kids and explaining how they're connected in that way. So we tallied up in each participant's picture description how many of these discourse markers they used and the kinds they used to see if there was a difference between patients and controls. And we found something really interesting. So while patients and controls use the same amount of basic discourse markers, so things like and, but, and also, controls used statistically significantly more complex markers than patients did when they transitioned between topics. So they used more positionals, like on the left, on the right, more causation, and more syntactic connections than patients did. And this shows that while patients and controls might be using discourse markers to create cohesion and coherence in their picture descriptions at the same rate, controls are giving more information about how the topics are connected to each other. And then we're looking at completeness. So amount of detail people are putting into their picture descriptions. In order to tally this up, we went over each transcription. We went through the picture and we made a list of the most prominent objects and their characteristics. So for instance, here we have the boy, but we're also looking at his shorts, his t-shirt, his sandals, the fact that he looks kind of his emotional state, the fact that he's walking his dog. So we did this for all of the objects in the picture and tallied up all of their characteristics. And in each picture transcription, we mentioned how many of these unique details both patients and controls mentioned, and we compared them to one another to see if patients and controls mentioned describe pictures with the same amount of detail. And we found that actually controls give statistically significantly more detailed picture descriptions than patients do. As you can see here, controls have about 23 details per picture versus patients with about 19 and a half. And while this might not seem like a huge difference numerically, it's a very robust finding. It's one that we find a reliable difference in patients and controls, which we're really excited to find a result like this. So yeah, in conclusion, we see that patients use fewer complex transitions to introduce new topics and also give less complete picture descriptions than controls do, which gives us quantitatively a way to measure the speech of patients versus controls. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to our research, and we're happy to answer any questions if you're interested.
Yeah, so actually a fantastic question that came in here for both Cecilia and Aubrey. Basically, the question is asking, how is it possible to do this much research and still maintain your academic rigor, right? So doing well in classes, having a social life, and then a further question about academic credit. Is there any academic credit that's affiliated with some of these research opportunities? And payment, is there any pay that is available for research?
Yeah, that's a really great question. One thing that I really like about the linguistics department is it's very much a community because we're kind of a small department. So every week we have meetings where people present on their research, and you kind of get to, talk with professors and peers and get like a little bit, you get to know other people, and so that kind of helps with like a social thing. The linguistics department also puts on like a lot of, like I learned how to knit through the linguistics department because they had a knitting circle one night, pumpkin carving. There's a lot of really amazing ways to have a fun social life through your department. It depends on what project you're involved in also, how much time you end up dedicating to that, whether you get paid. Because I turned this into my honors thesis, I get 3 credits per semester for the work that I do. There are some labs where you do get paid. I've been part of paid research labs before. There is one, Professor Parker in the linguistics department has a paid research lab that he does. It can be a challenge sometimes to keep up with everything that you're doing, but I find the professors here are really like understanding and here to support you. And if it's something that you enjoy, I think it doesn't end up feeling overwhelming at all.
Yeah, I would definitely add on to what Celia was saying. I think in general, you can definitely get a lot of support from your peers and from your advising professors. And I know that especially with discourse analysis at WM, our group meets once a week and we all talk through things, and we have a group chat where we can say, hey, I was, thinking about this one thing we talked about, like, how should I go about this? Or I came across this data that's a little confusing. So it is very much a collaborative space. And I think that takes off some of the like pressure or like the feeling of being totally stranded, because it is, I think, a very tight-knit community, like Celia was saying. And I'm sure that other departments have similar energies as well.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Very appreciate it. All right. So if we don't have any other questions come in for this research pairing, we will move on to our final formal presentation, if you will, of the evening with Gracie Patton and Professor Watkins. So I will pass it over to them to introduce themselves and introduce the project. And we'll wrap up our presentation portion, and then we'll open up for general Q&A with the full slew of presenters here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Watkins. I am a lecturer here at the college. I teach sort of broadly 20th century, lots of social justice, 20th century US. My particular focus is in the US South, but I taught this course called Dixie's Monuments, which takes a look at all of the ways that cultures, specifically in the US and the US South, centered, of course, on this idea of Dixie, but the ways that how we as historians might read non-traditional subjects, something like monuments, or in the case of Gracie's project, how reenacting, how clothing, how the material culture of the past might tell us things about the past that, say, the written word or a piece of music won't. And material culture is a fairly well-established discipline, and the act of making from original patterns, from period pieces, is not just a valuable scholarly tool, because, like I said, it does tell us things about the past that we can't get otherwise from the written word. It allows us to connect with the past in a way, but it's also useful well beyond the academy, well beyond museum studies. I like to use the example of Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings fame very recently did a documentary called They Shall Not Grow Old, and it's about World War I. And he used quite a number of the skills that Gracie used in her project. He took original articles of clothing and used that to colorize the film, and used artifacts and uniforms and oral histories and various pieces from the time to produce this incredible documentary. And so, just across the street in Colonial Williamsburg, they do very similar things, researching the materials of the past to accurately recreate the clothing and to recreate as much of the environment as they can. And so whenever Gracie approached me about this project, I was very excited to supervise this, because the sort of the very tangible stuff of the past is, I think, is a good way to, like I said, is a good way to get at the past, but it gives us, it opens up new questions. And so, I quite enjoyed getting to supervise this project in particular, but I'll let Gracie tell you more about it. So over to you.
Thank you, Professor Watkins. My name is Gracie Patton. I am studying history at William and Mary, and I don't have any slides because this is the project that I did was through the Monroe Scholars Program, which is basically, the first year Monroe Scholars Program, which is what I participated in, gives students funding and faculty support for research projects over the summer. And they're shorter term than I think a lot of the projects that we have discussed on this call so far have been. It's 120 hours. And I was not expecting COVID to happen, and so I was expecting to get to do more in-person work than I did, but most of the pictures of me researching would be pictures of me doing research on my computer in my kitchen. So I'm just going to talk, and then I can share some images of my final project at the end. But I knew that I wanted to look into women's uniforms in World War I, and specifically how the changing roles for women affected women's rights in the US after World War I, and women's social roles after World War I. And I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go with this, but as I was doing more research, I focused in on the Women's Land Army of America, which is kind of an unusual incident in history. It was an organization of women during World War I who were hired out to farms to replace the farm laborer shortage that was caused by the draft. And it actually had its roots in a similar British program, and it was tied very directly to the suffragist movement. And there's not that much historiography on it thus far. There's a couple of monographs that have been written about the Women's Land Army of America, but for the most part, it's kind of an ignored bit of history. So it was super cool to be able to use the Monroe Project to look into this aspect of history that hasn't been explored very much. And so the Women's Land Army of America was founded officially in December of 1917, but it had its roots in the summer of 1917 when a few colleges, Vassar, and then like a group in Westchester County in New York, organized like women's collective farms to train women to work to do farm labor, and then sent them out to farmers in the area to perform farm labor. And then it became an official program with, I think, up to 15,000 official farmerettes throughout 21 different states. That's what they were called, by the way, farmerettes. It was definitely an interesting name. And eventually got incorporated into the US Employment Service during the war. And there were hopes that it would continue after the war, but basically declining funding and declining interest in the program caused the organization to get dismantled in 1919. But so I was looking at this organization and specifically like who are these farmerettes and what were they wearing? And this was actually kind of an interesting quandary because farm labor is a heavily racialized labor force in the United States, as we are all aware. And one of the things that I learned through my research is that uniforms were actually seen as a way to distinguish these mostly white women farm laborers from farm laborers in non-war times. There's a line from the Los Angeles Times from, I think, 1918. Farm laborers do not wear uniforms, but the uniforms of the WLAA have proven to be an essential and desirable asset. Not only are they intensely practical, but they have exactly the same effect on the girls as they do on the men, that is the men serving in the military. One lives up to a uniform. And I continued to do some research, and there were like even newspaper articles that were, rather than focusing on what the farmerettes were doing, they were focusing on what the farmerettes were wearing. So the uniforms were definitely an intrinsic part of the farmerette movement. And they were also, sorry, the uniforms were an intrinsic part of the farmerette movement and what it meant to be a farmerette. And there were a lot of interesting and kind of unusual sources about the uniforms. There was, in addition to the newspaper articles I mentioned, there were like manuals issued by the Women's Land Army of America, as well as lots of photographic evidence. And what I had hoped to do before COVID struck was I was hoping to talk to a woman I know down in Tacoma, Washington. I'm from Seattle, so it's not super far, who has a collection of women's uniforms from World War I and World War II. And my intention had been to examine those uniforms in person and take pictures of them and look into how they were constructed and then eventually recreate one based on that research. But we determined that that wouldn't be safe for her or for me. She was, I think she's in her 70s and was concerned about being exposed to COVID. So instead, a lot of my research was digital, but I was able to look at a few items that I have that were like family heirlooms from the period, as well as taking those garments and combining that information with things from sewing manuals from the period. And I was able to recreate a uniform and test it out. I didn't actually do any farm labor because I do not live on a farm, but I was able to walk around in the uniform and examine the practicality of it for moving around and like bending over, things that you have to do if you're engaging in farm labor. And it was actually pretty practical. And what this means for women's history in general is part of the reason that trousers became more popular in the 1920s was directly attributable to the uniforms that women wore during World War I. There was a Seattle Times article that indicated that the popularization of overalls for housewives and for domestic workers was due in large part to the wearing of overalls by women farm laborers during World War I. And yeah, I have a video that the final product of the project was a series of videos about the research. So I did a video just about like, what is a farmerette? Then I also did a video about recreating a blouse that would be appropriate to be worn by a farmerette. I also did a video explaining the different layers that farmerettes wore. This was 1917, 1918. So these women were doing farm labor in corsets, which was super interesting. It is not impossible to walk around and move around in a corset. And so I made a video basically about the clothes and about the process of making them, which I can put in the chat if that's okay. I will do that. And if you're interested, you can see that video and basically learn more about my research through the video. And yeah, it was not as, like I'm not publishing this research, although I might continue to do more research and look into, possibly publishing something. But it was definitely an interesting way to learn about historical research and learn about how to conduct historical research on non-traditional topics, as Professor Watkins said. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Gracie. There's a question that actually just came in about your early pilot study. So did your early pilot study make you want to do research, or was it enough that, let me read that again. Did your early pilot study make you want to do research, or was it more, or was it enough? Want to do more research, or was that just enough?
I think I would definitely like to do more research. I've come across more sources since I finished this project that have made me interested in different aspects of like the farmerette movement and women's farm labor in general in this period and what it meant. So I think I would like to continue this research, but I don't know where my path will take me.
Excellent. All right. Well, any other questions specifically for Gracie pertaining to her research directly? And if not, we made great time. So kudos to all of the presenters this evening. Fantastic work of staying on schedule for sure. But would love to open it up to full questions, general questions. Would love to hear if there's any questions about research more generally at William & Mary, funding opportunities, where these students are going, what they are doing next, what their plans are, what faculty, how faculty have remained engaged in this, and maybe what that transition looks like from year to year. So happy to open it up to any questions that might come through. So again, the Q&A feature, just as a reminder, should be at the bottom of your screen. So check that out at the bottom of your screen. You can drop any question in there. You're also welcome to drop a question in the chat if that is helpful too. And the students also said they are also happy to answer questions about research, academics, student life, really anything and everything you want to throw their way. This is a fantastic group of individuals to gauge any questions that you might have. So it looks like we got one initial one that came in here. A question about, can incoming freshmen get involved in research before the fall semester? So I think maybe some of our younger research members, if somebody wanted to take that, that would be great.
Yeah, so I actually contacted Dr. Saha before I started my fall semester as a freshman. And so I was in contact with her throughout the summer, and I familiarized myself with the research project so that I could really like get heavily involved as soon as I got onto campus. So I think it's a great idea to at least like look at what research is available or what opportunities are available, and start talking to professors before coming. Yeah.
Sorry, I was unmuted and then I muted myself when I was trying. I forgot that I was already unmuted. Hello. Yeah, so again, I'm a current sophomore, and before I came on campus, I also reached out to a different professor in the linguistics department, Professor Jack Martin, who does some incredible work on linguistic revitalization. So I was able to start working on that project with him similarly before he even got to campus. So we were combing through some old archival documents that had documented the Natchez language. The last two living native speakers died in the mid 20th century, but we still had that archival material with which to work on reviving it. And then I joined Professor Cochran's lab doing different linguistics research now in the spring of my freshman year. So definitely reach out to professors, figure out what you're interested in. And the worst thing that can happen is they invite you to their office hours to chat. So, I think professors are really open to sharing about their research, talking, and perhaps getting involved directly.
There's another question here in the chat that is specifically for Professor Saha. So is it very rare for an undergraduate to actually publish a real scientific paper? I know we talked a little bit about publishing and we mentioned it briefly, but would love kind of an overview of that process and the rarity or the frequency of that.
Okay, and the answer to that is really clear, and the answer is no, it is not rare. So one of the things that I always tell when we used to be in person and I saw all the tour groups going through the ISC or other buildings, and parents would talk to me and students would talk to me, I said, when you're thinking of which school to go to and you're interested in research, always ask for a list of publications with the undergraduate authors highlighted and bolded. You will get a list that is so long, 50 and 60 undergraduate researchers publishing every year. That's just in biology. And I know that's true of geology, chemistry, a wide array of other departments. You ask for that list for some of the schools up the street, it's not going to look like that. And nothing against those schools, I had 5 kids. They all went up the street because they didn't want to be near me. But in the end, they said, boy, I wish I went to William and Mary because of the experience that they saw other faculty members giving our students. So it is not rare at all. And in fact, it's one of the goals. When we do research, it's not a play research. It's real, authentic, peer-reviewed research in high impact journals.
Thank you. I promise we didn't pay her extra to say that.
No, not at all.
Another question that came in the chat here that was specifically for Michelle, but I think any of our students who have either double majors or some overlapping majors. I know Aubrey talked about this and Celia talked about this a little bit, but how do you feel with the workload? So being a double major and having that workload with adding research to that workload. And I think another question that I'm going to tack on to that one is I would love to hear from a few of you if you could give us an estimated, guesstimated time that you spend in addition to your primary schoolwork on your research.
Okay, so as a double major and I'm also planning on applying to medical schools after graduation. The workload can be a lot sometimes, but I think that I think that it's manageable, especially if you have proper planning, you plan out your courses and you plan out your time so that you get everything done when you need to get it done. So that takes a lot of stress off of me. And it also helps me maximize the amount of that I do in the limited amount of time that I have at William and Mary. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Fantastic. Any other students want to chime in here with that, Aubrey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say double majoring can be a great way to pursue multiple topics that you're interested in, and hopefully, the things that you're studying are things that you're excited to learn about and excited to take classes about. I would also emphasize that you don't need to double major. You 100% can, but you can do a major and a minor. You can do just one major. I think William & Mary is really big on like the ampersand as a part of our identity doing this and that. And the and doesn't always have to be, I'm majoring in these two things. It can be, I'm studying this and I'm also really passionate about this club I'm involved in, or a volunteer thing that I have going on, or an on-campus job. So, but that's no way to say that you shouldn't or can't double major, or that it's too difficult, or that it's scary. I just want to like emphasize that you can study a lot of different, you can study multiple things without necessarily doing a double major. But that being said, I'm double majoring and I'm happy about my decision, and I'm happy about the classes I'm taking. Echoing what Michelle said, it can be busy. You know, sometimes you can have maybe more credits than some of your classmates do in a certain semester. But ideally, you know, you've chosen some things to study that you're excited to study.
I think a part of that question also mentioned advising, and yes, absolutely, you get advice on that. So you'll have a faculty advisor who works with you from the moment you're at William & Mary choosing classes. So I advise incoming new students and also linguistics majors. And I just spent an hour before this meeting chatting with someone about, you know, what are they taking for classes in the fall, and what are their career goals, and how are they going to do the summer internship. So there's a lot of support available to you with whether you're majoring, double majoring, whatever. There's a faculty member who knows all about how the curriculum works to talk with about that.
Thank you. That's a really, really helpful point. And just from a statistics perspective, about 30% of our students double major and about 20% of our students major in minor. So just to give you a sense of what that looks like across campus, but I think you've heard it from them directly. And again, none of that is scripted, of just, we really want you to find what you're passionate about and add on to that in a way that's meaningful and beneficial for you as a student. Another question here coming in about what kind of stipends / funding is available for students conducting humanities research. And is it possible to conduct remote research internships at William & Mary? There's actually two questions about remote research. So we'd love to pass that over to you.
I'll take the humanities. In history, we are sort of rather lucky to be an endowed department and to have a variety of funds and scholarships. And as faculty, I have over the last couple of years hired students to do remote summer research. So a couple of years ago, I'm working on an LGBTQ theater project, and one of my students just was looking for a research opportunity, and so approached me in the semester and said, hey, can I do any research? And it just so happened that he lived in New York, and I needed some stuff from an archive in New York, and so I paid him a stipend over the summer to go into the city and sort of do research. And so there are quite a lot of sources of money around if we sort of know where to look in the humanities. Right now, many of them are frozen, because of pandemic conditions. So, but as a lot of those open up, there are quite a lot of little pots of money. Some of them are very specific for the kind of research you're doing. But like we said earlier, approach individual faculty members and we can sort of work on that process. And oftentimes there's sometimes the paperwork and stuff involved, but there is quite a bit of funding and there is quite a bit of remote work, especially in the humanities when we can't travel to archives and stuff.
There's also funding available through William & Mary's Charles Center for student research. So things like student summer research projects or these honor projects that you've been hearing about, where people or students spend an entire year working on their own research. So there's not only funding available in the humanities as well as the social sciences and the sciences, but there's also funding that's specifically designed to let students do student research. So undergraduates can definitely find funding if they need it.
And I'll just chime in briefly that relates to the last question as well about the double majors and doing many things. William & Mary is just the right size to allow students, even in their research projects, to collaborate across departments. So if somebody can't decide if they like geology or biology, there are people in biology and certainly in the geology department who combine both, like Rowan Lockwood's incredible research as well. And with data science as well. And this plays into, I know data science is really big right now, across the country. Many of us in STEM and in the humanities as well are doing data science projects. And a lot of those could be done remotely. In biology, if you're pre-med, you want to analyze sequence, all of us doing biomedical research have remote data science sequence, gene sequence analyses. And I'm sure that's true no matter what field you're in across the university, that they're becoming so data heavy that there are probably a lot of opportunities for remote research. Although we love being with you in person, we really, really miss that. But there still are these opportunities.
That's super helpful. There's another question here, and it sounds like the student has reviewed one of our information sessions, saying that William & Mary says that 80% of William & Mary students conduct research before graduating or by the time that they graduate. And this question is specific for Professor Bailey, asking, is that true in departments such as geology?
The answer is yes. In geology, all of our students complete a senior research project. So that's actually one of the graduation requirements. So effectively, we would say we have 100% of our majors that are conducting research. And over the years, we've tried to broaden what the topics are. And sometimes they are related to internships or other projects that students may come to. And as Terry sort of mentioned, sometimes it's a question of trying to find a project that you really like in a particular professor's lab. And then the last thing I would say, because I've seen some of the other questions that are in here, some of the projects that come out come from basically some of the international trips that we run. And it's something you are there, and I can speak to being sort of both in Oman and Norway on international trips, and things that are part of that experience then get turned into actually research projects, and we find ways to get back there. And that's an exciting part of it, because that is kind of, I talked about a found department, but that's sort of found research. Until you're sort of there on the ground, you're not quite sure that that's an avenue that you could explore, but boom, you're there, and then we come up with ways to get back there. So hopefully that's not too around the mountain kind of answer for you.
Super helpful, thank you. Another question here that I think we hear a lot, at least in the admission office, from students and families, is about how these research opportunities can help with employment or other opportunities after students graduate. Yes, Professor.
I guess I'm back. I didn't go very far, did I? I have had a half dozen emails today about our current seniors who are, and these emails have been from prospective employers, and they want to know about, what did they do and why should they hire student X or Y? And part of what I can say to these employers is because they have done independent research at William & Mary. And so they know something about starting a project, doing sort of the work along the way, and then actually bringing it to a close. And I think for a lot of employers, especially in sort of the geotechnical and engineering field, the ability to take a project from start to finish is part of what they are really looking for. And as I said, I mean, my emails today, and if you see me looking down, some of those have been, oh, I got to do that tonight. And I can say that these students have done an independent research project, and you can't do that everywhere because of the scale and the size and all that. And I think that is something that William & Mary can always put out, is you've done these things, and that is a big plus, whether it's at the graduate level where they want you to do research, but also in the realm of doing a variety of things, from NGOs to sort of geotechnical work. The sort of starting, doing, and finishing a project has huge applicability.
And I'll just chime in here because I'm so proud of my students. I would say about 40% go on to graduate school PhD programs. They're just eaten up by these programs in a good way. I get letters from and emails from faculty who beg us to send our students there. And we're talking about Harvard, MIT, Caltech, all the Ivy League's PhD programs, because our students understand research so well. About 40% go on to medical school, very, very successfully. So that's another aspect where students who are pre-med, like Michelle, do research and really get an appreciation for what goes in to making a vaccine or biomedical research. Then about 20%, and I'm broadly reflecting the biology and neuroscience departments here, or neuroscience programs, go into technical positions. So they'll take a position, sometimes only for 1 or 2 years at the NIH. And I just have to say that one of my students graduating actually got a position with Francis Collins, who is Fauci's boss. He is the head of the entire National Institutes of Health and is begging for more William and Mary students. So that one's hard to beat. So yes is the answer. We do a great job in preparing students.
I just want to tack onto that you can also use research as preparation for jobs that are not necessarily about research. So for instance, we have lots of linguistic students who go on to graduate school, as everyone's been saying, but we also have linguistic students who are going straight into industry and government and not-for-profit work. And that skill set is invaluable. So I have a student who went straight into political advocacy work and is working as a professional activist, and was able to say, hey, I have a skill set of linguistics. I know how to relate language in society. Do you need a communications director for your activism? I have a student who went straight into a marketing firm in New York City and said, look, I understand communication inside out. I'm a linguistics major. This is my skill set. So you can take this research that you're doing and translate that directly into work. It's also a great way to get a reference that goes beyond, they came to my class on time, they did well, their final paper was pretty good. I will write those references and make them sound as great as I can, but there's a difference between that and being able to say, this person worked closely with me week by week for 2 years, and I saw them initiate projects and bring them to completion and use analytical skills and high-level writing skills to get published. Like, that is a recommendation you want. And just in the past week, I've sent out about, I think, 25 or 26 job application recommendations for current and past alums who are on a job search. So for me to be able to say, this person has worked with me and has work experience as an undergraduate is just really valuable to then take that out into the world. It really does translate, even if what you're going into is not, for instance, linguistics research that I do. I can still say, this person has skills. Let them talk to you about how they're going to take your marketing team to the next level.
And I know this is always a scary question for, actually, Professor Watkins, go ahead.
I was just going to tack onto that. I have 3 students this year who've gotten accepted for fully funded PhD programs. I have another student who, much like Leslie just mentioned, took a kind of, what is my skill set, and is now working in DC for a lobbying organization. And some have gone into museums, and some have gone into other places. And absolutely, that research skill set and being able to work closely with faculty, even if they're not going right into grad school, taking the sort of skills that you build open up all kinds of doors. And yeah, I'm able to write much better letters because of working closely with folks.
Absolutely. Well, and I know this is always a scary question, and I don't mean to put extra pressure on the students, but if any of you have a sense of where you'd like to go, what you'd like to take this experience to, we'd love to hear what maybe next steps and plans might be for some of you.
Well, as a senior, I am currently applying to jobs. And I do think that actually my research experience has been really helpful in, getting like job offers. So in addition to doing this research that I presented on, I've been involved in translating and transcribing like interviews in Russian as my Russian post-Soviet studies major half. And I have gotten like a job offer to do Russian translation after graduation. So having that research experience and actually working, in translation has helped me to get, job offers in that. So yeah, I think that research has definitely been really helpful in the job market.
I think that I mentioned this earlier, but I am planning on applying to medical schools, potentially MD, PhD programs after graduating from college. And doing research at William and Mary has helped me appreciate like how much research can impact the world. So
I'm really active in the climate space in my spare time, like climate activism. And my project featured videos, like I had to learn how to make and film and edit videos. And like videography is a pretty important part of activism lately. And so I'm hoping that if I go into that field, which I'm not 100% sure yet, I'll be able to apply these skills that I learned through a completely unrelated research project to working in the climate space.
And I can speak at least to a specific opportunity that my research definitely opened the door to. Looking at meme communication online led me to apply to a specific program within PIPS, which is Project for National Peace and Security. So the way that works is we have like upperclassmen, undergraduate students who are fellows, and then they have interns working under them on white papers. They get presented to the policy community looking at issues that are related to international peace and security. So my issue in particular is looking at how we could use memes as counter messaging for disinformation. So we find a lot of disinformation about the COVID vaccine. We find disinformation about, elections worldwide. And like, how can we perhaps use this unconventional communication strategy to counter that? And using my experience from research with Professor Cochran and with PIPS, I was able to say, look, I have researched disinformation and I've researched communication and I've researched memes. And I'll be doing an internship this summer, helping write a report on Russian disinformation in Eastern Europe and how it's being used to weaponize anti-LGBT sentiment and destabilize the region, drawing these Eastern European countries sort of further away from Western liberal democracies. So that is a specific, not necessarily post-college, but at least an internship way that the research helped.
Yeah, I'm actually going to take another research project on before I go into grad school. So it's another mapping project that will be published as well. And I'm hoping to get those skills and apply those to New Zealand, hopefully for my graduate school, and hopefully convince somebody there that I can help out there with mapping in that location as well. So that's another thing.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you all sharing with us and your bravery for doing that. So thank you, thank you. And really, we're slowing down on questions. So again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for those of you who stuck around to the bitter end as well. We greatly appreciate it. And again, on behalf of everyone here, hope you had a chance to learn a little bit more about William & Mary as a whole, but specifically the research that our fantastic faculty and students are doing. And hopefully you found it as inspiring as I do every time I get to listen to a chat like this. And again, on behalf of the admission staff, thanks so much for joining us. And we hope to see you at some of our final Digital Day for Admitted Student programming, which actually wraps up this weekend on Saturday. And just as a reminder, if you missed everything, there are all of the recordings on our website. So feel free to check those out in your free time. And if you are interested and ready to take the next steps, please be mindful that you can submit your deposit on the Welcome website as well, and reach out if you have any additional questions. I know these are some of our best and brightest faculty and students here at William & Mary, and hopefully got a lot of your questions answered today, but certainly if more questions come up, please reach out. You can see in my name right here, admission@wm.edu. And if we don't have the answer to your question, we'll direct you to the source and hopefully get that addressed for you. But again, a final sign off for everyone. We greatly appreciate it. Have a fantastic rest of your evening and go Tribe.